Okay, so let's say we're trying to understand what's going on with the world and where we fit and what we can do. I'm going to offer a simple general framework of how I see things. And hopefully it'll help for us to have a little bit of a framework. So first I want to share right here that we have three main, let's say, layers of reality. Okay. So this is what I'm going to call something related to the template layer. So imagine you have some kind of a blueprint on the level of energy and consciousness that is holding or creating or perpetuating what's coming from that. So what's coming from that is still stuff that you can't see, but that's there, and that's affecting that which you do see. So this is the psychological level, okay? This is all internal and unseen. Basically, this is built out of belief systems. Down here you have what is physically seen, okay? This is the physically manifest world. So let's say we're talking about someone's body, or let's say we're talking about an individual person. Here you're going to be talking you're talking about energetic template layers. You're talking about all the way above. You're talking about all of the spiritual layers of self. These are all I'm making three, but it's actually infinite. These are all different layers, versions of self. And then on the template layer, you're going to have some kind of energetic template, your etheric bodies. And then here you're going to have, I'm putting them together, but this is actually both the emotional and mental bodies. And then this is the physical body. Okay, so that's if we're talking about a person. In this case, I'm talking about all of society, which obviously includes the individual people. So one way that I could represent that would be, there would be a bunch of these little things within the big one, right? So let me just do that now and try to explain how I'm seeing or how I'm creating the cultural level. I don't know what I just did here. Oh, it's not moving. Okay, I don't have that much patience with technology, so. All right, forget it. Imagine that there's a little square in each of these, okay? I can't figure out how to do it right now. So there's a little bubble here, here, and here, okay? So the little bubble is representing an individual person, and then the bigger ones are representing all of society. So on the template layer, you have the template of energy and consciousness of the collective consciousness of everybody. Of course, you can get more specific, like which everybody are we talking about? Because you have all of, every dimension of reality, every single identity, every single concept of self. We can talk about on the earth plane, we can talk about the consciousness of Gaia and all beings. We can talk about the collective consciousness of humans, which is the layer that I'm usually talking about. And we can talk about the collective consciousness within specific communities. Those communities are so affected by the collective consciousness of humanity as a whole that I tend to not go to that level, although sometimes it's needed. And then from there, we can also look at lineages. So we're always looking at what's the cultural context now, right? Which is more of, let's say, like a horizontal thing. And then also how is that coming in through time, which you could call vertical, right? Through ancestral streams. Okay. So that's all the collective consciousness. With it, the individual, if there were this little ball in here, this little circle thing, for an individual person, you have the individual person's energy and consciousness, like in the example that I gave around the body, right? This is the energetic and etheric templates. This is very, very strongly affected by, created and perpetuated by the group consciousness. Hence, it's within it, okay? So this layer, if we're looking on the collective level, we're looking at the all, if you want to map it, you would map all of the belief systems that are happening in the collective consciousness of humanity. So this would be extremely full of basically every belief system possible. You could put the emotions, when I map this stuff, it tends to be more related to the beliefs, but you could map the emotions in this location as well. So for the individual person, obviously, every individual, due to their history, their culture, their lineage, their past life experience, their current life experience, is holding a certain piece of the puzzle. So there are certain emotions and beliefs that are going to be more active. There are certain things that are more triggering. There are certain frameworks that one person is going to look through that another person tends not to, etc. So there's a uniqueness for each of us holding one color of the whole rainbow, one piece of the whole puzzle. And then physical, as I mentioned, on the individual level, this would be a physical body. This is also physical actions and behavior. So if I punch someone, for example, here you also see everything that has manifested physically in the structural world. So banks, prisons, roads, country borders, school systems, war, environmental degradation, anything that you can see with your eyes, okay? So the main premise of this is what is holding, what is creating and recreating what's underneath. So whatever is on the template layer is going to be continuously reinforcing what shows up on the psychological layer, which is going to be continuously recreating or creating what's showing up on the physical layer. So now we're going to add one more piece, which is we're going to look at, I don't know why it's connecting to this thing. Okay, let's see if we can move it this way. So we're going to look at where we are today, where we want to get to. Oh, I made a little line between them for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay. Well, that's fine because it basically goes off into the infinite future. So I'm okay with that. So here, there really isn't any space between them, but I'm just leaving space so because I don't know how to make the lines. I want the lines to show through, but they don't. So there's actually no space between the vertical ones. But I want you to also be able to see these underlying ones. So what's happening here? Now I'm looking at a transition that society is going through at large. So let's say this is time from left to right. Okay, that's from time is going towards the right. So time, this is what I'm calling the old world, which is the world that we're leaving. It is very much still here. It is the main one that we see. This is what I'm going to call the new world, which is the world that we know is possible and that we have incarnated to bring forth. This is the transition. Okay. So basically, right now what we're looking at, so pretend that these lines go all the way through, okay? Right now we're looking at what's going on in the template layer, on the beliefs psychological layer, and on the physical layer here. Where do we want it to be? And as we transition, what's happening? So let's just give some basic examples. So on the physical layer, we have things like war, environmental degradation, we have poverty, we have all these terrible things, right? On this level, we have, well, and we also have, let's just add a few more. Colonization, slavery. I'm kind of sing-songing these terrible, terrible, extremely traumatizing things. Okay, so let's add one more. So what are we going to pick? Capitalism. Okay. So then you might say, oh, but I can't see capitalism. Yes, that's true. Um, what I'm also placing on this physical level down here is structures. Okay. So capitalism is a structure that holds things like companies, um, stock markets, banks, physical money. Okay. So this is basically a catch all for all of those things. Okay. Now, when we look here, we ask, what is the psychology that is able to create and maintain this stuff? So, for example, um, a lot of this is about people hurting each other. So we're going to say something like this is an us versus them mentality, right? We're also going to say there's something about a numbness or a turning away from emotion, away specifically from empathy, or an incapacity for empathy. How about that? Basically, what I could name this as is I can't feel. And I can't feel myself and I can't feel you, right? So something like this. Okay. Something about scarcity. So what's starting to happen here actually is it really depends on what you want to place in, let's say, the template layer versus the belief systems layer. Um, they can, there's kind of a gray space. So I could actually put, let's say, these up here, because these are more kind of greater concepts. And then we have certain beliefs around, well, honestly, it doesn't really matter. This is a general concept of separation. Mainly what I choose to put up here is whatever starts getting more and more um, central as the causes for everything else. Um, this is more related to mental and emotional. But basically, if you're looking at, like, I really wrote very few things here, and we're already covering immense territory. I'm going to add a few more. Um, this causes immense aloneness. And notice that if you feel separation and scarcity, there is a lot of fear. So fear I could also put all the way up here, but because it's an emotion and I'm saying this is a psychological layer, I'm just going to leave it around here. What I want to say with regards to the template layer is what you're going to notice is this is all about constriction, lack of flow, and rigidity. So this is what is being held somatically in the body, in the energy field, and in the entire field of the collective consciousness. So basically, we have a limitation. Let me go all the way here so that contrast can be really helpful. This is following the arising, emerging in each moment, or something like that. Okay, depends on, you know, the word following. It kind of depends on how you're identifying self. That's for a little later. So this is infinity. Infinity is flowing through. Life is flowing through. Each moment is unique and each moment is new. And what we're doing is we're allowing it to come through. That's what I mean by following. And we're riding the wave and we are expressing it. So here you have freedom. Here you have abundance. Let's write these. And the concept of self is really important. So here you're seeing, when I say separation, we're actually seeing separate selves. And that's what leads to an us versus them mentality, right? Here we actually, with freedom and abundance, we're at a level of oneness. So what that means is we see each other as as Indigenous people say, as all our relations, right? Or another way to say this, I wish we had a better non-gendered way to say this, but for now, we'll do what we can. We're saying, you know, we are all brothers and sisters, right? We're all family. How about we do that? So this is a concept of viewing belonging. This is an experience of belonging, which is completely different from the experience of aloneness. So notice that what happens here is you start having, because if you have scarcity, aloneness, and you're freaking out, you're going to start controlling and you're going to start competing, which basically leads to all this stuff down here, right? Okay. And obviously everything loops back and perpetuates itself. So maybe I can just explain a little bit of this. Basically, there's a huge concept here around turning away. This is about togetherness. This is about belonging and inclusion. When there's a separation, it's kind of like all the puzzle pieces fall apart from, you know, the puzzle kind of falls into all of its pieces. And the pieces don't all stay on the table, let's say where the puzzle was. The pieces start getting thrown off the table. They start getting lost under the rug. They start getting thrown out of the house. So there's something around exclusion and the belief that something can go away, which is there's actually a belief in limit and end. So I'm gonna put that up here. That's the opposite of infinity, right? Where could something possibly go? It's still within the great oneness, right? You can't throw garbage away, quote unquote away, it'll end up in the ocean because we're in one world, right? We try to throw people, throw people, quote unquote, out, right? All kinds of exile that has happened throughout history. For example, deporting someone, you're just putting them across a border, right? There's no away. So it's the whole not in my backyard concept, right? Not in my backyard is because self, whether self is individual, like literally a backyard, or whether it's a community, like a country, where it's this, this is our territory, the concept of territoriality, you could put in. I could fill this with a gajillion words. These are just a few. So there's a separation, and then there's a limit, there's some kind of concept of border, right? And of course, the concept of border is related to boundary. We still have boundary. We still have coherence, order. I can say boundary, although honestly, boundary feels like something related to this. It feels like it would have a different word around here. But what I mean by coherence is this is not chaos. Okay, there's a fear here. Part of the fear, part of the need to control is there's a fear of chaos. Why? Because the constriction is already being created by its own belief that something needs to be controlled. That flow and openness are somehow it's the unknown, it's the unpredictable, and it's considered dangerous here. There's the concept of danger, of the unknown. So it's fear of the unknown, and then a need to dominate it. So I'll put that with control. We'll just add domination, dominance. By the way, a lot of this stuff that we're doing here, we could add words that are more cultural words, right? Because here you can attribute this to a collective or to an individual. We have words that explain cultural norms that are related to this, such as patriarchy, sexism, you know, we can do with racism, xenophobia. So we start seeing how we're attributing these feelings and these behaviors to certain groups of people who are doing them or receiving them, but everyone is involved. Every human being is involved in all of this somehow. Oops. Okay. Let me kind of speed this up. So basically here, we're gonna have, there's two things I want to say. We're gonna have the opposite of what's here, but we're also gonna have something that I can't fully define or even talk about because it's not here yet, okay? So what we see from within the constriction is not what you see from outside of it. So I really want to honor the fact that this is actually extremely unknown because this is where we are, we're in the transition. So the view that we have of the new world from the transition is a limited view, because what we're wanting is the new world and what we're building or going for is the new world. But we are doing that while we are conditioned by the old world, or at least aspects of ourselves. And so the aspects of ourselves that are conditioned by this are still imprisoned within this constriction and within the separation and the walls, the territory that this covers. And we are blocked out of the territory that it doesn't cover. Because what this does basically is we create an imprisonment for ourselves and then we live within it. And then we act based on only the resources that are available within these constraints. We do not have access to anything that's outside of these constraints. Okay, this is looking weird because it only has one word in it. I'm going to take this out because I want it blank right now. So let's look more at this and this. Here we have no limits. This is infinity and this is oneness. This is literally everything, right? And so there's something where, how does this everything express in coherence? So we as each body, as each individual self, which is a body, we are expressing a uniqueness that's entering into form somehow. Okay, so there's immense creativity here, creative expression. We also have co-creation. So this is how we are relating with each other, right? Before we were relating through control, through control, competition, and dominance. And now we're relating through, you know, some of this is kind of the in-between, right? I made 3, but some of these you notice are kind of the transition between the 3. So for example, the physical is created by these types of actions, right? Which isn't really psychological. It's kind of in the middle somewhere. Oops. So let's just kind of hover it somewhere in the middle, okay? I'm going to do the same for these words. And this here is kind of going to be a middle one too. I have to cough again. Hold on. So what's showing up in the physical, we actually don't know yet because we haven't seen it. One more cough. Here we have some clues. So we have, honestly, I don't really know what you're going to call this, but I'm going to call it intentional communities, things like eco-villages. I'm sure there are more names than just that. But basically we're seeing bubbles within stuff that still looks like this. We're seeing bubbles of co-creation and creative expression happening. But it's within a limited geographic range. And it's also, different ways of relating. I'm going to say here, let's say transformative justice. And here I'm going to put the prison industrial complex. So there are communities that are creating new ways of being while the old structure is still in place, right? So for capitalism, there are people who are doing gift economy. There are all kinds of attempts at peace and equality, right? There are a lot of initiatives and beautiful, beautiful practices and groups and generosity and all this kind of stuff happening here, right? So this is a very active space, actually, the physical range of the transition. The reason I'm not putting it here is because we actually don't know what this is going to look like. We can only see from the transition view what is currently here. Is transformative justice going to exist here? In my personal opinion, no, because you're not going to have even the actions that are needed to be healed from transformative justice. Those actions aren't even going to be happening anymore. This is the level of peace that I'm talking about. For example, here we have certain kinds of laws, right? A lot of the laws are perpetuating injustices, right? They're perpetuating all of this stuff in a lot of different ways. I guess technically they're not perpetuating what we would officially call slavery, but they are perpetuating similar things, and it's still happening regardless. So here we would have laws that would allow for more equity. Here, do we have laws? Probably not. Why? Because, and again, this is, well, I don't know how relevant this is, but this is an external boundary created. I'm going to call this healthy boundaries, right? This is an external social level physical boundary created to block certain ways of behaving that would be harmful. That does not exist here. So those laws are not necessary. Why? This, any not feeling or any numbness is going to create some kind of harm because there isn't empathy. Here, there's empathy all around. And I would say it's more than empathy. It's direct compassion. Here, maybe we'll say there's empathy. Let's try to let's go here for a second because I keep doing the two extremes. So let's go to the transition period that we're working on. The template layer of the transition period is actually both, right? You have constriction in certain areas and you have flow in certain areas, right? You also have a lot of purging, expression of what was previously blocked, and metabolizing, right? So this is basically what you could call this is, it's basically working through karma, right? Things are coming up from the past. Maybe we're grieving what we need to. Maybe we're becoming more self-aware and we have more capacity for, what's it called? Self-management. There's another, starts on R. What is it? Okay, I'm just gonna say self-management. It'll come later. I don't like self-management because it sounds like constraining yourself, and that's not what I mean. Self-regulation. There we go. Okay. So basically, I'm aware of what I'm feeling. I have gentleness towards myself. Right here we have generosity, gentleness. These are ways of being, right? I'll put them kind of here because they're kind of They're actions, actually. And they're allowing for these more structural things. I'm putting, by the way, this in-between space that I'm doing right here, like these ones, these are individual actions that are leading to these more structural, societal level things that you see down here, okay? That's why I'm kind of putting it in the middle. Notice that the transition period also still includes everything from what I'm calling the old world, okay? You're gonna have here, because we still have a lot of density, I'm gonna add density. So here we can add flow, levity, and spaciousness. And we can say natural coherence. The reason I'm adding natural coherence is because if you're like, oh, well, this is really structured, everything's going to be chaotic. Actually, I'm talking about a coherent openness and a coherent freedom. And there's still order, like, what do you call those? Like Fibonacci sequences, you know, all of this beautiful, the concept of sync, the concept of complexity theory, how there's a natural order of life, of shapes, of systems in nature that don't require us through the mind. Oh, this one's huge. So here you have mind over body and heart, right? This is the dominance of the mind. That's actually who's afraid, right? Because the self has, so, okay, there's a lot going on here. So separate selves is like me versus you, right? I am separate from you. We are separate from them. And then there's a separation within self, which is this one, the mind over body one, right? So there's a split between me and you, and then there's a split within me, within the individual self. Okay. Here, what's happening is there's a mix, there's a separate, oftentimes what's happening is based on the awakening going on within each individual, there's the concept of self is extremely varied across individuals as well as within the individual. And the concept of individual that I'm still using is a concept of, it's a transition concept, because we don't actually know what self feels like when the collective is actually in awareness of collective as self. So here we're going to say identification of self in individual is still happening a lot. That's mostly what's happening. And we're going to say some identification of self as collective. So that's some of that is starting to happen. So in that case, often there is more of a sense of togetherness. Although here it's really happening big time. So what I'm going to do, just so I don't have repeat words, is I'm going to remove the things that are totally repeat, because this is actually a Venn diagram, right? This is that middle shape between the two circles, which are the side two. So it actually includes what's here as well as what, actually Venn diagram is not a good example because then it wouldn't include what's on the outside. Let me say this in a different way. The transition technically looks like this. Okay? Oops, this line can't be there. All right? It looks like that. That's what the transition actually looks like, right? But then I don't really have a map. So visually, I'm going to leave it like this. Okay. Why? There's another reason, not just because it looks pretty. To be really, really clear about the fact that there are some unique aspects within the transition that are unique to the transition that will no longer be there when we're here. And to also, I need to cough one more time. Okay. To be aware, and this is part of the, being as emergence and acting as emergence in opposition to an over solidification of rigidity. The reason something important to note about the transition is we are acting the transition with a mixed consciousness. We have some of the oneness consciousness, and we still have a lot of the separation consciousness. Let me be more clear. We are this always. And the point is, the one that is perceiving self as who we are right now is the one who's saying, I am me, I am this is what I perceive as reality. That's the one I'm talking about, is the conscious human self. Okay. So what this being or what this society is conscious of, or perceives to be reality, is highly, highly influenced by an experience of a limited view. So just to be clear, when I keep talking about this layer, what keeps coming up is concept of self and reality. Okay, so a lot of this is about what's your paradigm. This is all metaphysical, spiritual stuff. Where are we going with this? Let's see. Okay, so the transition is going to make assumptions about what the new world is like through the lens of the old world. For example, the old world has certain structures in place that have been in place for a very long time. Capitalism is actually not that old, but let's say colonization or concepts of war has always been around. Let's say concepts of conquest, right? It wasn't always called colonization, but conquest has been around forever. Slavery has been around forever. So there's a rigidity here that actually lasts. There's something that lasts a long time. If we are in a reality of emergence, of flow, notice this is actually about presence. Presence means here and now. It doesn't mean continuing what was yesterday. Maybe the here and now does have what was there yesterday, but because it's relevant and present and alive and created in the here and now. Not because it's stuck. Here you're stuck. Which is why in the transition, there's a lot of purging and metabolizing. And why there's actually a lot of what looks like chaos, and a lot of what looks like I was going to say pain or aggression, or trauma that reveals itself, because it's kind of like a volcano erupting. All this stuck stuff is coming out, which is actually the purging. I'm just calling it that now. So it looks like chaos, right? This is a view of chaos. what happens in the transition, so let me just name what I was saying about presence. So in the transition, when we start building this stuff down here, the physical, oh my God, I keep trying to click on things. Okay, forget it. When we are trying to build this stuff, the first thing that happens is oftentimes there's a mentality of looking only at the physical level and saying, oh, obviously all of this is harmful in a lot of different ways. Let's create new structures. Let's create new action. Let's create new ways of being. This is absolutely necessary, right? Two things about that. One, whatever we create now is for now. Not necessarily relevant for later. So thinking that we are going from one fixed world to another fixed world is a mentality of a fixed mentality. So what's it like? We don't even know what it's like to have the flexibility and to have the level of creativity and the level of moment to moment aliveness to actually live structures that are fluid and that are fluid structures. So it's one thing to keep in mind is that we're currently creating structures for where we're at now. That's great. Later, we're going to create structures for where we're at later. Another thing about going like this, horizontally, right? We're trying to protect the earth. Help, help, protect, right? We need to, what does protection mean? Protection means I want to save the earth from other people who are attacking it. Here, there's no protection because no one's attacking it. This is honoring. This is reverence for Mother Nature, right? Because here, the earth is actually still in it. What's earth here? Maybe I don't even have the word for it yet. There's the closest I could maybe get is an I-thou relationship, but that's still a duality of self, right? So what's necessary here will be relevant here, but it's necessary to get us from here to here. Now, what else was I going to say about this let's say horizontal transition is whatever we try to build, if we go straight from, oh, I don't like that law, I want to make this law. I kind of want to make more lines here, but maybe we don't focus on that right now. So what is necessary for me to go from this law to this law? Is this going to hold? As we know, just looking at history, this is the more typically discussed, you need to go to the norms level. This level, by the way, we could call the norms level, right? So by norms, let's see. Here we have a lot of, well, okay. When I said old world, I'm also kind of including just like general terribleness. Obviously, our current world and historically has also included positivity in it. But I'm purposely focusing on the pain body of humanity. But so in the norms, I'll put the more positive stuff here. I'll say things like liberal and radical politics. Okay, this is still within a lot of constraints. It's not this, right? Here we might have something that looks like, I don't even know, but looking at I've noticed that looking at indigenous traditions, because it's such an unbroken line of a deep awareness of togetherness, there are a lot of really, really important clues of things that the guardians of viewing life as all our relations and the guardians of the concept of interconnectedness and interdependence and interbeing, we can get a lot of, we can get, I don't even want to say clues. We can get a lot of truth and a lot of very important ways of relating. So let's say one of them is consensus. Here we still have a lot of top-down leadership. It doesn't mean that you can't here, right? But I don't know. I have no idea. But top down in the way that we currently have it, it can be really wonderful. It doesn't have to be a control type of top down, right? Where was I going? Okay. So what I was going to say is to change something. Wow, there's something in my throat that just doesn't go away. Okay. To change something on a structural level, what actually needs to happen, which what a lot of people know, is you need to change something first on the norms level. So that's on the cultural version or layer of this. If you're going to look at the individual person, it's the same, right? If a person is acting in a certain way, they're acting habitually, they're behaving in a particular pattern, and you want that behavior to change, you're going to have to look at what are the belief systems, what are the thoughts and the feelings that are leading to that continued behavior, right? If you don't work on the layer of the belief system, the behavior is going to continue. So same thing with the culture. Okay, what affects the belief system? What creates the norms? What is holding this layer of stuff in place? What's holding patriarchy, sexism, racism, xenophobia in place? How do you change that? Because poverty and all kinds of abuse, I'm saying domestic abuse, all kinds of sexual abuse, all kinds of stuff, this is happening because of this stuff, right? Etc. We can take this and put little lines everywhere. It goes everywhere. Okay, I'm going to stop making lines, but you get the point. How do you change this? That's changing the norms layer, but what's creating the norms layer, right? So you're looking at the belief systems. You're looking at things like, I believe I'm alone. I believe there's scarcity. I believe that we are separate. I believe that this is an in-group and an out-group. This is where I belong. This is where I don't. I believe that this is my territory and those are the walls and I want to throw you to the other side of it, right? There's a belief in a way. I don't think we did that one. What's leading to or causing or creating all of that stuff? Everything up here. Oh, here it is. Okay. Really, what we're looking at is the concept of self, right? And it's been separated. And there is an immense fear. I'm going to put this all the way at the top because that actually is what keeps us stuck. And oops, where'd it go? And it blocks us from actually moving out of this square into the next one. So what I just did here is I went up, 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 right? Now that I'm up here, I'm like, wow, I'm really scared. I'm feeling really separate. Everything's constricted, nothing's flowing. There's total rigidity. There's total density. What does this look like? This is death. This is non-life. What's going to survive in this? Look at a natural system. Can a natural system exist within rigidity? Something that is like, has basically over solidified. What I mean by that is like, you created a definition and it just stuck. There's no change, right? So this is not life. We're talking about something that's basically static. Where's life? Life is constantly opening and revealing itself. Life is constantly changing. Life is arising in each moment. So through the fear of the unknown, we leave the box. That's why I'm going to put that kind of outside of the box, right? If we allow ourselves to go here, then we're going to start moving through the transition into the new world. What allows us to transition? First of all, desire, and when we are forced to. So just like for a person, right? Sometimes what's going on down here, let's say there's, oh, by the way, I'm going to put physical illness here too. Let's say there is, there's so much illness, there's so much abuse, there's so much everything that you're like, oh my God, I can't take it anymore, right? What happens is we enter the unknown through some kind of a surrender. Now, surrender on the let's say the very difficult side is actually feels like giving up, right? So we give up, and then the moment we give up, the mind has actually lost its control and its dominion, its domination. And it lays itself down. It's like, I'm tired, I can't do this, I give up. If we continue alive through that, through this basically living death that we've been living, there is a surrender. And then there's, oh my God, I don't know. Okay, I actually want to make this some kind of a little transition. I want to make, well, I guess that's what this is. Okay, cool. So I'm going to, it's so funny. I just kind of forgot. Okay, so we're going to add, these are all actually transition concepts, right? Okay. So what was I just saying? Okay, this is the, I don't know, this is called beginner's mind, or the don't know mind, right? Okay. So all of a sudden, because let's actually slow that down a little. Everything that this box relies upon is that it relies upon us thinking that we know what's going on. Okay, so there is an immense, phenomenal amount of arrogance, which is I know what's going on. The issue is the I that's saying that is the I that is already separate. Okay, so whoever is saying I know is a tiny little being. It's not everything. It's the little one that's stuck in the box, that's cut up in pieces, that's stuck within its own constriction, within its own tiny territory. And it's like, I know what's going on. How can you know? You're stuck in a tiny prison cell of your own mind, right? And that's the problem, because the I know, it perpetuates the whole thing because it thinks that this box, now I want to light up the box and now it's not, oh, there we go. It thinks that this box is the whole world, is all of reality. So why would it ever leave it if it thinks that it's the whole thing? There's no need to leave it. There's no desire to leave it. There's not even an awareness that it could be different, that there is anything else. So this is the great perpetuator of the whole hell realm, the whole nightmare here. Okay, so then what gets us over to the transition is actually, I don't know, right? And so there's a beautiful kind of thought emotion matrix that's curiosity, right? And a desire to learn. This all of a sudden opens us. It opens us to creativity. And there's different layers and levels of creativity. But what's amazing about curiosity is it has an openness to the unknown. which means it has an openness to diversity and uniqueness. Here, what often happens is there's kind of like when a factory makes all the same t-shirts, you start having like a custom made, I don't know how would you say that? You start having a life of uniqueness, right? Rather than everyone fitting in to the same box. Brene Brown has a beautiful way of saying that belonging is you're actually being yourself and you belong, whereas here you have fitting in, which is you're molding yourself into this cookie cutter ideal of what someone is supposed to be like, right? And here you're just you. So there's a uniqueness and there's an openness to learning about the uniqueness. So it's a celebration of diversity. It's like, wow, tell me your story. Tell me your experience. What's your culture like? What was your family's history like? What's your personal experience like? So the curiosity, it keeps opening, right? So the first opener is some kind of a surrender and some kind of a don't know. And then it keeps opening because then there's this curiosity. Let's learn. Okay. So obviously in the transition, we still have all of this. We still have our conditioning, both within ourselves as well as within our culture, where we're not, oh my God, we're not always curious and we're not always doing all of this, right? Actually, we still have a lot of righteousness. And here's the funny part. Now in this transition, if we're here, we're basically trying to do good. We're like, hey, there's something better and I want it. I want it for myself and I want it for my world, right? But then how are we acting to get there? Or how are we acting to do it? Are we being it or are we talking about it? Are we trying to force it on people? Are we trying to think that we're better than people because of it, etc.? So whenever we're creating some kind of righteousness, this is not beginner's mind, right? This is still, where is it? This is still part of like a legacy of the arrogance. Another legacy of the concept of separate self, sorry, this is getting a little full here, is now there's like a better than thou. How do people say that? Right? There's like oh, I'm so great and you're not, right? I'm so great because what is that? That's not togetherness. So we notice that, oh, and what that does is there's just a lot of judgment, right? So as we're trying to do good, we are now pointing to whoever is acting or revealing any aspect of themselves that's still here in the old world way of seeing or being. And we're like, oh my God, can't believe you, right? Even though we obviously have these aspects too, and we're actually acting them out in the very moment that we're judging. Here, we have complete acceptance. Judgment does not exist here. Why? Because we have total compassion. So I kind of briefly jumped on this. What's the difference between empathy and compassion? When I talk about compassion here, what I am really saying is I see your individual heart from the eyes of the great heart. So I see you as being the great heart with me. And I see the aspect of you that has separated individual heart from great heart and is living from this separation. And I have compassion for that. I have love because I am seeing you as me, as us, as all of us. And I am seeing the pain that you're experiencing from the aspect of your consciousness that's living within its own encasing. as a separate and thus more limited, less resourced entity. That's what I mean by compassion. So I'm going to call it seeing from the eyes of the great heart. What is the difference? What's going on with this compassion, which allows for this acceptance, in comparison to the judgment? First of all, the judgment is happening from my identity is actually coming from a small self identity. Okay, it's coming from this stuff and viewing you as separate from me as well. Here, my identity is coming from self as whole. I want to connect some of these lines. Wow. Notice how all of this is about self, right? And then there's something here. This is kind of about how we create together. And it's all about creating together. So basically, those are the main words: creativity and together. Here, that's not happening. How much creativity is happening here? You're in a closed system that's very stuck. There's basically no creativity. There's a lot of redoing the old or fighting it, right? There's a lot of armoring. There are a lot of walls. Here, you're talking about flow. You're talking about dancing, and you're talking about the ocean. You're talking about singing, right? I'm naming those things because they have a certain vibe to them. They have a flowy vibe, right? The ocean is, it's flowing and ever changing. A song is, it's lyrical. It has a magic to it beyond regular talking, right? Dance is not just like walking, which is more of a rote task. It's more of a repetitive pattern, right? It has this spontaneity. So here you actually have novelty and spontaneity. Spontaneity, right? That might be what you keep seeing. So why am I putting it down here? I don't totally know, to be honest. What I really want to put at the top is a different version of it, which is, this is actually continuous birthing, which I could call true aliveness, right? I'm going to call that here. Why am I putting some stuff here versus in here? Honestly, just because I'm writing really quickly and I don't have time to think about it. There's no like secret reason. Okay. So how do we conclude? First of all, there's no conclusion, because this is a continuously self-birthing process. But what are some of the takeaways that we can, just from this conversation, have? First, looking at some core tenets. We're going from a limited view of self to an expanded view of self. This is me versus you, us versus them. This is all of us. This is we. This is togetherness. This is family. This is oneness. By the way, I have not discussed multiple dimensions. This is a huge aspect of this is what I would call dogma, okay, which is the aspect of religion that is not alive. It's the rule-based aspect that is passed on without thinking, without direct experience. It's just like, this is how it is, right? It's part of the I know arrogance, right? And, oh my God, there's a huge one that I didn't add, which is adherence to authority, externalization of authority. Okay, what does this mean? We actually have a little bit more to discuss. So here we have control and dominance and all that. The externalization of authority is we actually follow these guys, right? I'm not putting this down here because there's too many lines, so I'm just going to leave it up here. Okay, that's why. When we are given dogma, we are not we're allowing the mind over the body. Again, the location of these is just starting to be because of space, okay? We're allowing the mind to say, this is how it is, rather than, I'm going to say body, heart, I'm going to call this direct experience, okay? Or intuition, we can add that word, okay? Instead, it's just, we are being fed religious dogma from our authority figures without questioning it. Okay, another quote unquote religion that I'm going to add here is what atheism has created as its own religion, which is the religion of scientific materialism, which basically says, and I appreciate its attempt, right? The attempt of dogma is to connect people with God, which right now I'm going to call it's love. Right? Which is also, by the way, everything that's arising, what's arising? It's love, okay? So I'm gonna put that in here because it is the basis of everything. It is self and it is everything that is created, okay? New world. This is, okay, very important. So that's why I'm putting it up here. What was I just saying? Okay, so dogma was a really, it was an attempt at connecting people with God that went super haywire, right? Due to control, domination, etc. Right? There's a huge political desire to control the masses, and then a lot of violence, and then basically atheism and scientific materialism came in and said, hey, dogmatic people, you guys are crazy. You're really hurting yourselves and each other. Let's go towards science because that will be safe and that will be more true. And so unfortunately that went haywire in its own way, because that became the dogma of scientific materialism, which is only that which is seen through or perceived through the five senses is real, right? Basically saying only that which is physical is real, or only that which basically, this is a lot larger conversation, but only that which is validated through that lens, that belief system is basically gonna be everything is seen through that lens, and thus all conclusions are happening through that lens. Okay. Where was I going with this? Honestly, I don't remember. So how do we get out of this, which is basically the concept of dogma, is the don't know. And what reveals itself through the don't know is the continuous is the continuous birthing, is the experience of intuition guiding each moment. I'm going to say each perception, because here we're at kind of more of the internal, and then here I'm going to say intuition guiding each action. What is the intuition? Some people are like, oh, but I did it from my intuition. That wasn't your intuition. If it was a harmful thing, that was most probably, let's say, quote unquote, your gut, which is, I mean, honestly, people use these words for such different things. So let me just be more clear. Let me back up, okay? Because I don't want to create misunderstanding. Sometimes people are like, I don't know how to feel my intuition. That's a whole other conversation. Sometimes people are like, no, that was my intuition, when actually it was conditioning, right? Instinct and intuition are different. Instinct is a conditioning. Intuition is a listening to the greater love that is continuously birthing through us, that allows us to act as conduits of it. So individual self, I'll put some kind of concept of individual self down here. Individual self is a conduit or a channel through which greater essence of self is emerging through and expressing through. Okay, so to close, we're doing general conclusions. So General conclusions. Very constricted, very solidified, open, arising, birthing. This is basically like living a living death, and this is actual living. This entire thing is held by a separate self that's viewing from within its own walls, viewing others as on the other sides of those walls, and then we keep building more and more walls, and we keep putting people and things on different sides of the walls. From those views, we then make all of these conclusions, and then from all of those views and conclusions and thoughts and emotions, we create all of these social structures. We then maintain it through actually thinking that all of this is true and real, and through cultural level limiting beliefs, such as these ones, that hold it all in place and tell us that this is how things really are. Trying to change the structure directly is extremely difficult and basically won't work if the template layer has not shifted, because it's the template layer that keeps recreating. It's like, when you refresh your browser, whatever is in the code of the website that you're on, every time you refresh, it's going to recreate what you're seeing. You need to change the code, the template. This is the code. You need to change the template layer, the blueprint of whatever is revealing itself, manifesting itself physically, in order for that change to actually be permanent. So what that means is we go all the way up and around. So how much are we hanging out up here? And just to be clear, what we're doing is we're going up and around like this, right? Up, 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 up the old world, and then going all the way down the new world. But this isn't like a one-time thing. This is a continuous, simultaneous worlds happening, rather than an arc. It's more like what do you call that? A spiral, right? So this is kind of one go around on that big spiral, let's say. It's really hard to try to make a metaphor around something that's simultaneously occurring. But what we're doing in this great arc, let's say, is this kind of transition is often what we're kind of currently seeing as we do that great arc. So what can we notice? We are in transition now. This transition is very rocky, right? There are experiences of chaos, of volcanoes erupting, of a lot of constriction, and then a burst. Because here you kind of have a natural flow. Here you have stuck, exploded, right? So it's more staccato. And then, of course, what happens is, because we're viewing this stuff through a mind that wants order, that's used to predictability, when that happens, we clamp down in a lot of different ways, or we check out because it's too much for us. Or we get really reactive because we take certain things personally. So how are we experiencing the transition? Because this is where we are, right? There's a lot of purging happening. There's a lot of need to metabolize past karma. We can get stuck in that, or we can get blown out by it. And these are, like in complexity theory, there's something called attractor patterns, which are basically these cycles or these vortices. You can think about it like a black hole, kind of. And so are you getting sucked into the black hole, or are you surfing the wave? Are you allowing it to happen while you're holding the container, you're holding the field, and you're just letting it happen? Or are you getting totally sucked in? So can we, both individually and as a culture, know, wow, we're going through this crazy, crazy transition period. This is rocky. This is unknown. Can we hold certain core tenets? Can we hold a beginner's mind? Can we hold an awareness that something is birthing, and it's a continuous birthing that's peeking through? It's like the volcanoes are erupting. It's peeking through those locations where this life force is able to reveal itself. And as it does, it's kind of like opening a tap, like in a sink that hasn't been opened in a really long time. And the water is kind of dirty at first, right? Because there's a huge backlog from everything that we've been pushing down here that's now coming up, right? There's a lot that we haven't processed. There's a lot that we haven't given our attention to, that we haven't held and loved. So all of that stuff is going to come up for us to be present with it. It's not just going to disappear, and we're not just going to throw it in the cosmic garbage can and click delete forever, right? Everything that we had pushed down and exiled. Do I have exile in here? Because that's a really important one. I thought I had written it. Just in case, I'm going to put it in. Uh-oh, something froze. Okay, let's just pretend I wrote exile, okay, because my mouse is frozen. Everything that we had quote unquote exiled or pushed out, pushed down, is now revealing itself as part of the family. So how can we say, welcome home? I see you. Ah, there we go. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. Oops. How can we say, I see you. Welcome home. You belong. I embrace you. This is the transition. Now I'm going to define the transition, right? You have this, you have this, you have this. And another way I'm going to define it, this is what's happening, right? You have an alchemy of the infinite touching that which has experienced itself as finite. They're touching. The infinite is saying, hi, self, I see you. You are a part of me, right? And the one that's finite is like, oh my God, oh my God. So every aspect of us that didn't belong, or that we weren't embracing, or people in society or whatever, now we're saying, oh, hi, oops, I totally ignored you. Or, oh, hi, I attacked you. Or, wow, I felt really alone or ignored or attacked, right? All of a sudden, people who didn't talk before are talking. Communities or races or groups of people who didn't understand each other, who weren't hearing each other's stories, are now learning about each other. This is happening within the self too, and inevitably, right? So aspects within me, this alchemy is happening within each of us as individual selves. The infinite within me is meeting the finite within me. The infinite within me was always holding the finite within me, but the finite within me, that which deemed itself separate, is now actually feeling it and saying, oh, I feel you there. Oh my God, you're poking, you're tickling me, right? You're touching me. There's a, like the finger gets through and it's like, boop, hi. And so there's an alchemy. It's like when we open a door between a hot room and a cold room, the air molecules move through until both rooms are warm. Not a very good metaphor, because we're talking about the infinite here. The infinite doesn't really become warm. But basically, everything gets reintegrated. So this is happening, but there's also kind of some ups and downs happening. Integration. this is the healing version, right? Sometimes it's still kind of rocky, but that's eventually what's happening. There's at least I see you. Sometimes the conditioning is like, oh my God, what do I do with that? What we do with that is we welcome each other home, right? Sometimes there's still rejection. There's a lot of confusion because we're still acting here. Oops, sorry. We're still acting in this big one. Okay. So we are living with a don't know mind, aware that there's an alchemy going on, aware that we can be curious and desire to learn, aware that we can allow ourselves, not just grieving, but we're going to feel all the feelings, right? And here there was a lot, there's this separation. It's duality, right? So this duality is not just about self. No, I can't click on it again. Here we go. Duality is not just about self. It's about good and bad, light and dark, right? So this concept of good and bad, it bleeds everywhere. Where can I put that? This says new note, so I'm just going to put it here. Okay, so duality is kind of on the framework level, and then one mental construct of that is the construct of good and bad. Okay, framework level, mental construct level. Sorry, this is getting kind of hard to read. So how can we live this rather than through the good and bad? When we feel the feelings, we don't say, that's you, that's me, I'm good, you're bad, you're good, I'm bad, da 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 da. But instead, oh, this is what we are experiencing right now. And if we as a collective are experiencing that, then of course I'm going to experience my own version, because I'm aware of a fractal nature of reality. Meaning I'm aware that whatever is in the collective is expressed in the individual. And so in that case, we're not taking things personally. And thus, we don't have to judge. And being aware that we're all doing this and it's normal. And we can, what is very important is we can, what I'm calling hold the field, right? We can hold stability for each other. Maybe I should put that up here, I don't know. Well, it's kind of an action, so I'll put it down here. So noticing that this is happening on the collective level, this is happening individually, this is happening relationally. And so to close, where are you? Where are you working? How are you spending your time? Where are you putting your attention? Are you more of a physical layered person? Are you really into constructing and deconstructing structures? Are you putting your attention more on the psychological? And are you doing this on a cultural level, on the norms level, or are you doing this more on the individual level, like the belief systems within each individual? What we would generally call the psychological level. Right? Do you think more physical or non-physical, or do you think more individual or collective? It doesn't matter, it's just what you're into. But noticing that whatever you're into is you're placing yourself to work in certain locations of this one map. And we are all, no matter where we're placing ourselves in one, this is one map. Or are you working up here somewhere? Are you the kind of person who's working on this stuff within yourself and who is helping other people with this stuff? So in the transition, I'm going to name 2 general archetypes of types of helpers, quote unquote. There are many. I'm just going to name 2. Healers and social justice people, activists, okay? Oftentimes, the reason I'm naming this is oftentimes these groups, I only have 6%. Well, we're going to end before then. So oftentimes those groups maybe act or perceive each other as if we weren't all on one map. We're on one map. Oftentimes, people who are acting in more activist roles tend to act naming the injustices that are happening in the current physical structures of society. And oftentimes also naming the norms that are creating those physical structures. So we're talking about collective level norms and collective level structures of the old world. Naming the injustices and saying that something new must happen. And sometimes building whatever this new thing is, right? Oftentimes healers are working on more up here, okay? More on the non-physical, on the unseen, and often on the template layer. Well, it depends what type of healer. Psychologists are working here. I'll just name those as well. So a psychologist, right, a therapist, someone, a coach, right, who's working often with mental and emotional layers of self, are working with individuals, and they're working on the individual thoughts and emotions. And then the healer, what I'm calling an energy healer or a spiritual healer, is someone who's experiencing individual awakening and helping others with the same, with awakening and healing. And that's often happening somewhere on these top three, and it's often happening on the layer of the individual person, not usually not on the collective. There's an understanding of those people that there is a collective impact. So the reason I'm naming that is noticing, oh, do you work more on the collective layer, or do you work more on the individual layer? Do you work more on maybe the non-physical, more energy consciousness layer of things? Do you work more on helping people with their beliefs and their emotions? Do you work more with cultural norm change on more of a, let's say, a collective or political level? Or do you work more with building, right? A lot of people who call themselves change makers are going to be somewhere in this area, right? Creating new structures. I would say, there's some stuff here. There's a big movement. Okay. Some stuff here is what I could call social business, impact investing, sharing economy. A lot of this comes still from within capitalism, okay? But it's an aspect of the transition. Gift economy is another level of that, right? Intentional communities often work from another level of that, which, by the way, here, protect the earth, I already have it. Okay, so there's a new relationship with how nature is cared for here as well. Renewable energies, things like that. New forms of, here we could put like factory farming. Here we could put something like permaculture. Okay. Part of the transition is things like charity, both just in terms of giving money as well as volunteering, right? Or different forms of redistribution of wealth. Right? So these are just some archetypes of like, oh, do I call myself an activist, a change maker, a healer, a teacher, a good friend, right? It doesn't matter what your career is, but whether you're, most people aren't paid for working the transition. Some people are, but a lot of people are still making money from within the constraints of capitalism, right? Here you could put, all kinds of corporate stuff. So it doesn't matter what your official job is. You know what your job is deep inside, right? What you were born here for. So where do you place yourself? And we need people everywhere. We need all hands on deck, and we need people in all locations. We need people working on themselves. We need people helping other people work on themselves. We need people tracking what's going on in the collective. We need people working on systems level stuff, naming what's wrong. We need people building something that works better for everyone. We need people spreading messages. We need people questioning why certain things are being done in certain ways. We need people everywhere, right? So the question is, who am I? And may the answer be, I am us, right? We are doing this. Because based on where we're viewing ourselves, where we belong, do I belong to my name or do I belong to all of us? You know, where is our intention coming from? Because if I am a separate self, I'm going to be in a survival view of wanting to get ahead, protect myself, compete, right? We're going to get stuck in a lot of the old world mentalities. So can I be, how much of the new world can I be? Because the being is what directs the doing, which will then reveal what is seen, what is the result, right? Who am I being all the way up here so that what comes out of my creation, what comes out of my words and my hands and where I put my attention, where I put my money, where I put my effort and time, is aligned with our togetherness, with our a view of self as all of us. Because then we get to do this together, because we can't do it alone. It's not possible. It's too big. The only way we are going to transition is if we transition together as one family, one human family, going through this huge, 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 unprecedented shift. So the transition cannot be done, even though we still have the conditioning of the old world. It cannot be done through the lens of the old world. It's not going to happen. That will simply perpetuate the old world. So how can we, even if it's just 3% of ourselves or 25% of ourselves or whatever, that's able to view from the view of love and togetherness, from the knowing, the deep knowing, right? Because this is thinking, right? I think I know. This is I think. Here, there's actually a heart knowing. This is a real knowing. And some people say, how do you know the difference? You know the difference. And if you don't know the difference, it's because you're not doing it. It will come from the heart, not from the thinking. So how much can we allow the aspects of ourselves that are still constrained to learn from the aspects of ourselves that know this? Because we all know this. Because I'm calling this the new world, the thing that's coming, but it's actually what has always been. We have an inexplicable knowing that this stuff is true. So here's a question. How do you have some kind of deep, deep, deep natural knowing of all of this if you haven't seen it? Right? Because our world, it looks like this. Obviously, there's good stuff too, but there's this, right? There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of inequality. There's a lot of violence. But somehow we know. So what is that? So we find our place and we lead from the aspect of ourselves that is already here.